Before we get to the story, I'd like to say thanks so much for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading cosmic horror-related stories every single day. So if that sounds good, please drop a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot, especially when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. I've spent my career watching the sky for things that might end the world. Asteroids, comets, near-Earth objects tumbling through the dark on trajectories that might intersect with our fragile little planet. It's quiet work mostly. Long nights at the observatory, reviewing data, running calculations, tracking rocks that will almost certainly miss us by millions of miles. My name is Yara Okonkwo. I'm 52 years old, and I'm an astrophysicist at the Cerro Paranal Observatory in Chile. I've been doing this work for 23 years, and in all that time, I've never found anything that truly threatened Earth. Until the night, I found something that threatened everything. It was late January when the alert triggered. I was reviewing automated detection data, the usual stream of objects our systems flag for human analysis. Most of them turn out to be nothing. Sensor glitches, known objects on expected paths, cosmic noise that the algorithms can't quite filter out. This one was different. An object had been detected entering the outer solar system, beyond the orbit of Neptune. That wasn't unusual by itself. We track interstellar objects occasionally, wanderers from other star systems passing through our cosmic neighborhood. But this object's trajectory was wrong. It was moving too fast for its distance from the sun, and it was decelerating. I ran the calculations 3 times, certain I'd made an error. Deceleration requires thrust. Thrust requires intention. Natural objects don't slow down as they fall toward a star. They speed up, pulled by gravity, following the laws that have governed motion since the universe began. This object was breaking those laws. Within hours, telescopes around the world were tracking it. The data was consistent everywhere. Something had entered our solar system from interstellar space, and it was slowing down. Not drifting through, not passing by, arriving. The object was designated ISO 7 for Interstellar Object 7, but the media quickly started calling it the Visitor. Speculation ran wild. Alien spacecraft, a probe from another civilization, a natural phenomenon no one understood. Governments convened emergency meetings. Space agencies redirected resources. The world held its breath. I spent those first weeks obsessively tracking the object's path. It moved through the outer solar system with apparent purpose, curving past Jupiter, adjusting course near Saturn, exploring the moons and rings as if surveying them. It wasn't heading directly for Earth or the Sun. It was searching for something. My colleague Dr. Kofi Asante, a theoretical physicist, worked alongside me trying to understand what we were seeing. The spectroscopic analysis produced impossible results. The object didn't reflect light normally. The spectrum was shifted in ways that suggested it existed partially outside normal physics. What if it's not made of our matter? Kofi asked one night, his voice tired and strange. What if it operates under different physical laws? I didn't have an answer. None of us did. As the object moved through the solar system, it left something behind. Not debris, not radiation, something stranger. Regions of space where the object had passed began showing anomalies. Light bent in ways it shouldn't. Time measurements became inconsistent. Instruments malfunctioned when pointed at these areas. One of the old Pioneer probes, still drifting in the outer system, passed through a region the object had traversed. Its telemetry went haywire, then stabilized into something unrecognizable. The probe was still transmitting, but the data didn't pass as any known format. When engineers finally decoded fragments, the information described physical constants that didn't match our universe. The probe had been converted, transformed into something that operated under different rules. Kofi and I worked together to understand what was happening. His theory was disturbing in its elegance. The object wasn't just made of different physics. It carried different physics with it. Like a seed carrying genetic code, it carried the fundamental constants of a different reality. Where it passed, it left traces of that reality behind. And those traces were slowly converting our physics into something else. The object was a seed, not biological, but cosmological. It carried the blueprint for a different set of physical laws, different values for constants like the speed of light, the strength of gravity, the behavior of electromagnetic forces. When it found the right conditions, it would plant itself, and the physics it carried would begin to propagate outward. I realized where it was going, not Earth. Earth was too small, too cold, too simple. The sun. It was heading for the sun. The sun was the perfect substrate, enormous energy, complex nuclear processes, a furnace that would accelerate the propagation of the new physics. If the seed took root there, the altered physics would spread outward at the speed of light. It would reach Earth in 8 minutes, and everything would change. I calculated the timeline with shaking hands. At current trajectory, the object would reach the sun in approximately 6 months. 6 months until our physics became obsolete. 6 months until life as we knew it became impossible. Life depends on specific physical constants. Change the electromagnetic force slightly, and atoms can't form stable bonds. Alter gravity, and stars burn wrong. Planets lose their atmospheres. The new physics wouldn't destroy us in any violent sense. We would simply become impossible. Our chemistry wouldn't work. Our biology wouldn't function. Matter itself would behave in ways that couldn't support what we are. There was nothing we could do to stop it. The world's governments tried anyway. They launched nuclear missiles at the object, a desperate, futile gesture. The detonations were successful in the sense that they exploded. The object was unaffected, but the nuclear explosions themselves became contaminated. The energy release behaved wrong, spread wrong, dissipated according to rules that weren't ours. A new pocket of altered physics now existed where the detonations occurred. We had made things worse. Communication attempts failed too. We sent signals on every frequency, in every format, using every mathematical language humanity had ever developed. There was no response. Not because the object was ignoring us. It simply didn't perceive our signals as communication. It wasn't intelligent in any way we could recognize. It was more like a force of nature, a process, something that did what it did without awareness or intention. You can't negotiate with gravity. You can't reason with entropy. And you can't stop a seed from growing. When the truth finally reached the public, the real truth, not the sanitized versions governments had been releasing, the world reacted in every way imaginable. Some people rioted, others prayed. Many simply continued their daily lives, unable to process what was coming. There was a strange normalcy to the end, not because people didn't understand, but because there was nothing else to do. I returned to Nigeria, to my childhood home, to be with my family. I hadn't seen my mother in years, hadn't spoken to my siblings in months. Now, with 6 months left, not just for me, but for everyone, everything, I wanted to be where I started. I told my mother what was coming in simple terms. She listened quietly, her weathered hands folded in her lap. Then she asked what I wanted for dinner. Life continues, even in the shadow of ending, maybe especially then. I returned to the observatory for my final months. It was my job. It was what I'd always done. I would do it until I couldn't. I documented the changes in the sun meticulously, scientifically. The altered physics was spreading through the solar mass like dye through water. The sun was becoming something new, still a star, still a nuclear furnace, but operating under different rules. The pockets of altered physics the object had left behind continued to evolve. Some grew larger, others stabilized. Small probes sent into these zones stopped functioning, or functioned in ways that made no sense. One probe reportedly began transmitting data about observations it hadn't made yet. Kofi published a final paper on what the new physics might look like. In the new universe, he wrote, atoms would be larger, less stable. Chemistry as we knew it would be impossible. Stars would burn differently. Life, if it could exist at all, would be nothing like life on Earth. The paper was posted online. There were no peer reviewers left who cared about academic rigor. We were all just trying to understand, to document, to bear witness to the end of everything we knew. On a Tuesday morning, the object reached the sun. It didn't impact the surface. There is no surface, just layers of plasma and fire. It descended through the corona, the chromosphere, deeper and deeper, until our instruments lost track of it entirely. It disappeared into the heart of the sun. And for a moment, nothing seemed to change. Then the anomalies began. Hours after the planting, solar physicists noticed the spectrum shifting, colors that shouldn't exist, wavelengths that didn't match any model. Flare activity changed, becoming more regular, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat establishing itself. The sun was still the sun, still burning, still providing heat and light. But something was different. Something was growing. Over the following days, the changes became impossible to ignore. The sunlight began to feel different, not to instruments, but to humans standing beneath it. Still warm, still bright, but with a quality that made people uneasy, as if something fundamental had shifted just beneath the threshold of perception. Scientists confirmed that the altered physics was spreading outward from the sun's core. At the current rate, it would reach the corona in weeks. Then, it would begin radiating into space. When it reached Earth, the transition would take less than a second. Everything would simply become something else. I woke early on the calculated day of transition. The sun was rising over the Andes, painting the sky in colors that already seemed slightly wrong. Too golden, too warm, as if the light was bleeding from a different spectrum entirely. I made coffee and drank it slowly, watching the dawn. Today, the new physics would reach Earth. Today, everything would change. I drove to the observatory one last time. My colleagues were there, those who hadn't left to be with family, those who wanted to see the end from where they'd spent their lives. We gathered at the solar telescopes and watched together. The boundary of altered physics was emerging from the corona now, visible as a shimmer, a distortion, a wave of different light expanding outward. It looked almost like a sunset, golden and strange, beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. I recorded my last scientific observation, the time, the position of the boundary, the rate of expansion. I noted that I wasn't afraid. I noted that humanity had done everything it could, and it wasn't enough. And that was okay. Some things are bigger than us. Some changes can't be stopped. That doesn't mean our existence was meaningless. It just means it was temporary. Everything is temporary. The boundary crossed the orbit of Mercury, then Venus. Then it was racing toward us, a wave of transformation moving at the speed of light. I could see it now without instruments, a shimmer in the sky, a wrongness in the light, reality itself becoming uncertain. My colleagues gathered at the windows. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. At 11:47 a.m. local time, the wave reached the observatory. I felt it pass through me. Not pain, not sensation, just a shift. For an instant, I perceived everything, every possibility, every configuration, the mathematics of existence rewriting itself around me and through me and in the spaces between my atoms. And then I was still there, still standing at the window, still looking at the sun. But I was different now. Everything was different. My body still existed, but it was made of different atoms, following different rules. My thoughts still flowed, but through a mind that operated on principles I was only beginning to understand. I was still Yara, and I wasn't. I was something new, something that couldn't have existed before the transition, something that existed now, in a universe that had just finished being born. The transition wasn't death. It was transformation. The new physics didn't forbid consciousness. It just supported different kinds. I found myself thinking in new ways, perceiving in new ways. The world around me was strange, familiar shapes rendered in unfamiliar rules. Light behaved differently now. It moved in curves where it once moved in lines, cast shadows that didn't match their sources, revealed colors I had no names for. Sound was different too, richer in some frequencies, absent in others, carrying information my old ears could never have detected. But I was still here, still aware, still myself, in some fundamental way that transcended physics. I looked around the observatory and saw my colleagues, transformed as I was, wearing bodies that resembled their old ones, but operated by different principles. We stared at each other, trying to speak, finding that language still worked, even though the mechanics of speech had changed. Yara? Kofi's voice was strange. Harmonics I'd never heard before layered into the familiar tone. Are you still you? I think so, I said. Are you? He laughed, or made a sound that served the same purpose. I don't know, but I'm still here. That's something. Not everyone made the transition. As we explored the changed world, we found that many hadn't survived. Not killed exactly, but unable to reconfigure. Their patterns too dependent on the old physics, to translate into the new. The world was emptier now, populated by those whose consciousness proved flexible enough to adapt. We mourned them, those who couldn't make the crossing. We remembered them, even as our memories themselves became strange, stored in substrates that worked by different rules. But enough survived, enough to be called a continuation. We found each other. We transformed beings, recognizing kinship in the midst of strangeness. We began the slow work of understanding our new existence, mapping the rules that now governed reality, learning to live in a universe that had changed around us. I came to understand what had happened. The seed didn't destroy life. It changed the conditions that life requires. Most life couldn't adapt. Bodies too dependent on specific chemistry, minds too rooted in particular physics. But consciousness itself, the pattern that underlies awareness, proved more flexible than anyone expected. Those who survived did so because something essential about them was transferable. Not the body, not even the brain, but the pattern, the way information was organized, the relationships between thoughts, the structure that made a person who they were. The universe was different now, but it still contained beings who could wonder at it. In the years that followed, if they could still be called years, we explored our new existence. The sun burned with different light, emitting spectra that no human eye had ever been designed to see. But our new eyes could see them, and they were beautiful in ways I couldn't have imagined before. Earth was still here, still orbiting, though nothing that once lived on its surface remained unchanged. New forms of order emerged, new patterns that the new physics allowed. Not life as we knew it, something else, something that served similar purposes but operated by different rules. I thought often about the object that started it all, the seed, the visitor, the carrier of different laws. It was never malevolent. It was never even aware. It was just a process, doing what it did, transforming physics the way rain transforms landscapes. No intention, no cruelty, just change. I learned that this had happened before, elsewhere. Other seeds, other systems, other transformations throughout the galaxy. This was how the universe evolved, not through slow change, but through sudden rewriting. Different physics, competing, spreading, establishing territory. Not good or evil, just the way things work at the largest scales. We were part of something vast now, a cosmic process that operated on timescales and distances that dwarfed human comprehension. The seed had planted itself, and a new branch of physics had taken root, and we had been transformed into something compatible with its rules. It wasn't what we would have chosen, but choice, I came to understand, was a smaller thing than I once believed. The universe doesn't ask permission, it simply becomes. I found myself one day, or what served as a day in the new physics, standing on what had been a mountain overlooking what had been the observatory. The sky above me was filled with unfamiliar stars. The light was wrong, the colors strange, the patterns nothing like any constellation I remembered from my old life. But it was still a sky, still full of wonder, still beautiful in its own strange way. I thought about my mother, who hadn't survived the transition. I thought about my colleagues, some of whom had made the crossing, and some of whom hadn't. I thought about humanity as it had been. Billions of lives, thousands of years of history, everything we built and dreamed and feared. Gone now, transformed into something else, or simply ended, but not forgotten, not by those of us who remained. I looked up at the alien stars and felt something that might have been grief, or might have been gratitude, or might have been something the new physics allowed that had no name in any human language. Something entered the solar system. It carried different rules, different laws, a different way of being. It found what it was looking for in the heart of the sun, and it planted itself and grew, and everything changed. But existence didn't end. It just became something new. I was still here, watching the sky, wondering at the strangeness of it all. Different, but here. Changed, but continuing. And the stars were still beautiful. Even now, after everything, the stars were still beautiful. I stood on the mountain as the strange light shifted around me, as the unfamiliar wind moved through whatever my body had become, as the universe continued its endless process of becoming and changing and growing. I thought about all the things we lost, all the things we gained, all the things we became. I thought about Kofi's question, "Are you still you?" I didn't know the answer. Maybe there wasn't one. Maybe identity was just another pattern, flexible enough to survive the transition, persistent enough to maintain continuity even when everything else changed. I was Yara Okonkwo. I was 52 years old. I was an astrophysicist who spent her life watching the sky. And I was something else now, something new, something that couldn't have existed in the old universe. Both things were true. Both things were me. The new stars wheeled overhead, following paths that obeyed different laws, burning with fires that consumed different fuels. Somewhere out there, other seeds were drifting through other systems, carrying other physics, ready to plant and grow and transform. The universe was vast and strange and constantly changing, and I was part of it, still watching, still wondering, still reaching toward the light. Something entered the solar system, and nothing was ever the same. But something survived, some pattern that transcends physics, some spark that refuses to be extinguished. We're still here. Different, but here. And the stars are still beautiful. That's enough. That's always been enough.